Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. I've got a great guest tonight. I've got a really superb guest again next week. I've got Ann Morrison. Ann is a real live Broadway star, been on many shows on Broadway. I just was up at the American Stage Theater in St. Petersburg and saw her in a show that she had written, directed, and starred in. And it's about a trip that she made to Scotland and her time in a fairy glen and the four stage plays and stories that came out of that. She'll be here in the studio. You are going to love her. You're going to love the show. Be sure and tune in next week. Before I introduce tonight's guest, I'd like to tell you a bit about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network and about the Spiritual But Not Religious show. Uh, Actually, the Spiritual But Not Religious show came into being before the broadcasting network, and it just all really kind of came together as a result of the Spiritual But Not Religious. It is a the idea here is there are really at this point, I'm sure millions of people who call themselves spiritual but not religious. And because we really don't gather into any kind of a central group, a church, or some go to church, but most don't, we really have no voice in the world. And we are a group of diverse thinkers, diverse believers, and the Spiritual Broadcasting Network is about celebrating that diversity and about bringing those voices to you, and so that we have a voice here in the community. So be sure and join us. If you know someone that would make a good guest on our show, written a book or doing something that's pretty active in the spiritual community, please contact us, and we'd be glad to talk to them about being on the show. My guest tonight is Hillary Ramo. Hillary is a really renowned healing expert, energy healing expert, a clairvoyant. She's a teacher. She's just a fantastic lady. She has her own radio call-in talk show, talks to some really great people. I know you're going to have a good time with her tonight. And she's got some pretty wide, varied spiritual experiences that we'll have Hillary share with us tonight. Tom, we got Hillary on the phone?
Yes, we do, George.
All right. Hillary. Hi there, Hillary. You able to hear me tonight?
I can hear you. Am I going to hear George okay?
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, good. Good evening.
Hi, George. How are you? Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
Hillary, did you have your computer speakers on?
I do.
Yep. You'll need to. We'll get a lag there. You'll need to turn those off.
How's that?
Oh, that's much better. Well, actually, we won't seem so alien to one another here. Or at least hopefully we're not going to. You know how this stuff goes. Hillary, I'm pleased to have you. Before we get started here and talk about some of the wonderful, really exciting things that you've done and that you're doing, I'd like our audience and myself included to get to know you personally a little bit better. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you some questions about your personal background, and we'll kind of take a look at, and then we'll kind of get into what's been going on lately for you. Are you married, Hillary?
I am, yes.
And do you have children?
I do. I have two boys, two fabulous boys,
That's fantastic. How old are they?
10 and 12.
Oh, wow. You're right in the middle of. You must really be busy. I see your schedule and what's going on, and you got two boys you're raising, and your husband. How does your husband handle what you do?
Well, he's supportive in every way he can. I'm a handful.
Well, it looked to me like you might be a handful, a good handful, but a handful nonetheless.
Yeah, no, he's really supportive, and he's a wonderful person, and he keeps me very grounded, which I need at times.
So is he? Oftentimes I'll have a guest that the husband or the wife is a bit of a cynic or not quite a believer in what we're doing here. How is he with that?
Well, I can tell you a story, George. And
Yeah.
The story is that he does semi-pro bass fishing, and
Oh,
so every time he goes out for a tournament,
Uh-huh.
He asks me to do some Reiki on the boat.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And I brought home, like an amulet thing from Egypt the last time that I was there, that the local fishermen in Egypt would put on their boats to help them, give them good luck, good juju, to, catch lots of fish, and he swears by it. So he's been converted.
Oh, that's great. Well, there's nothing quite like hitting a man's heart and helping him catch a big fish.
That's right.
No question. Well, so you have a whole new line of business now. You're doing Reiki on fishing on bass boats, huh?
Yeah, I guess you could look at it like that. Yeah.
Hey, what the heck? We never know what opportunity is going to come along.
I don't think anybody's covered that market yet.
No, I think I think you're right, and finding people with this kind of thinking who are bass fishermen might be a bit tough generally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, listen, tell me. It looks like from what I see, you started really early in this. You had an experience with your grandfather at 5. How about talking to us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it wasn't a planned thing, and I've talked about this quite a bit on other shows and in different interviews. But,
right.
The way that it happened was he was doing some meditation. He was at that point in his life creating CDs and meditations where he was leading people through guided visualizations and so forth. And he was doing it himself, and he was hooked up to a biofeedback meter that was measuring his heartbeat, and it was clicking and making a sound. And, as a 5-year-old child, I was really interested in what that sound was. And
Sure.
so I asked him about it, and he showed me how it would, go with my heartbeat, and he hooked it up to me, and I was fascinated. And, as a little girl, it was something that was just kind of one of those neat things. And then he said, "Do you want to go on a journey?" And I said, "Well, sure." And that was it. And he led me through a past life regression, a full-blown out-of-body experience for me. And it was really just one of the most amazing things of my first 5 years of life that I've ever experienced. And it just kind of blew open channels for me that have never closed. And I'm really grateful for that now at this point in my life. And I can honestly say that, in the years past, it's been very challenging for me personally to, have all of this, I'm very sensitive and have all of this incoming data, so to speak, on different situations and people and things. And it took me some time to really figure it out. I had my grandfather's guidance for a while, but he wasn't my primary caregiver. So it was, an interesting journey to say the least. But at this point in my life, when I look back on that now, I can certainly understand from the perspective that I work on professionally that it opened up my chakras, and it was a complete kind of clearing of those channels, and they have stayed open ever since. And so I've learned how to work with them, and now I teach other people how to do the same thing.
Well, I'm sure it had a profound effect on you because when we're 5, we're not inundated with all the disbelief, and that's all suspended for us. You were into the mystery and the magic and the wonder of the world at that point, so we're very, very open. That's a fantastic experience. Do you remember much about the regression itself?
Oh yeah, in fact, it's I can recall pretty much every step along the way of the experience, like it happened yesterday. And in fact, with all of the work that I've done since then, now even included, it was the most clear and the most realistic journey, I have to say. And so, I met my parents from a past life. That's what he said. That was the intention, that I would go out of my body and I would go into a space that I would meet somebody. He kind of set it up. He didn't, he set it up in a way that it was, you're going to meet a guide or you're going to meet somebody when you get to this certain particular point in the journey.
So he set an intent, but not necessarily a specific.
He didn't. It wasn't a suggestion. He didn't, plant a suggestion, so to speak.
Right.
But and that's what happened when I walked through that doorway. There were 2 people standing there, a man and a woman, and they appeared to just be like ordinary farmer country people. And the setting to me felt very much like the countryside, the green rolling hills behind it. If you've ever been to England, you know how beautiful that countryside is once you get out there. But what struck me the most was the feeling of familiarity and knowing who they were, and having the emotional energy come back. And that was what stuck with me the most. There was an emotional recognition, an energetic recognition.
Leaves a real imprint with you.
Yeah, and so I feel that, and I've gone back into that lifetime since, and I really think that I passed away young. I think I might have been like an older child, or maybe a preteen age or something like that, but I feel like I left that lifetime very young. But it was a very happy and nurturing and content-filled feeling when I saw them and recognized them. And so, like the kids you see in the movie, I was drawing obsessively, drawing those pictures afterwards,
Right.
wanting to go back, and so it was a very difficult thing actually to process as a 5-year-old, and it was difficult for my parents to process that too, because they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't have any resources, and they really didn't understand what my grandfather did as a psychic and as a channel. I mean, he grew up with a regular 9-to-5 job, and then all of a sudden, about midway through his life, he decided to put his gifts to use.
So really threw the family kind of for a loop then, huh?
Yeah, it
Wow.
did. So, but it's been a healing process for all of us, and as I've kind of branched out and learned how to work with them, and along with my grandfather's guidance and other teachers' guidances over the years, it's been a really wonderful experience, and I've been able to process it. And like I said earlier, it's been a big blessing in my life. For sure.
So how old were you when you actually decided that you would go into this line of work and use your empathic abilities? Was there a turning point for you, a place where you made that decision, or just kind of it all kind of like blend together?
Well, that's a good question, because I got into regular 9-to-5 jobs. I went to school for psychology. I figured I would try to put to work some of the things I was at least seeking out for myself. I wanted answers anyway, and so college background I went through for psychology, and but then I wasn't really finding the answers to the things that I really wanted, and it seemed like the world of psychology was just putting people back into boxes, so to speak. So it was kind of like, here we have these labels, and I was seeing people who were diagnosed with certain things who really would just be kind of self-fulfilling. A lot of the times, a lot of the things, oh, okay, now I have this, so now I know how to act. And I didn't like that part of the work. But I appreciated it. There's a lot of good uses to that kind of therapy, and so I pursued that. I didn't finish it. I just decided it wasn't for me. And I started to explore, I guess you would call alternative. I call them more traditional modalities. But
They really are more traditional, aren't they?
yeah, they really are.
We
And
just
so
lost
I got
that
into
fact.
exploring shamanistic
Right.
different aspects of that culture, but I did a lot of studying on history of religion. I kind of switched gears from psychology and went into history of religion, and thought, well, maybe I'll find the answers here. And some things just started to click for me, and I started to really have a lot of questions after going into those places. And that was actually before I went into experiencing energy work and trying to work with it on that level. So yeah, that's my background, and that's kind of how I got into it. And then I started traveling and going to different places, and fell in love completely with ancient sites and different things along those lines. And
Well, it looks like you had some really interesting experiences. I want to talk about 2 or 3 of them. Well, the first one I'd like to talk about is you mentioned that you were in some sites with that you had with Mayan priests, and you had the crystal skull ceremonies that these priests led. What was that? What was that like?
well, it was really unusual at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It was really fascinating, though, at the same time, and it was the Mayan priests were in the United States, and they were leading ceremonies with crystal skulls in Sedona, Arizona, and it was one of the first trips that I made for myself in branching out and seeking that more alternative, quote, traditional healing. And
Right.
I met some really incredible people, and it was very synchronistic, and the ceremonies that they led, the people that were invited, were my first exposure to that, and which ended up leading me going to Peru. I met my son's godmother in Sedona and ended up going to Peru with her. and having more ceremonies and more initiations actually in Peru with shamans down there. And it was not a produced kind of workshop / trip kind of thing. It was not. The way that it happened was very organic and very spontaneous. And in fact, I was 5 months pregnant. In fact, when I went to Peru with my son.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so I was, I had 30 mothers. I was there with a group, but the way that the ceremony happened was we were in a small store. This gentleman was a shaman, and he and his wife ran a store, and they sold, homemade, handmade things and such. And everybody had left the store, and she was talking to him about something in their language, and something came up about an item that I had on me, and I was wearing on me. And all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, he closed the store down. It was myself, him, and my son's godmother, who's Brazilian. And we ended up having this very small, intimate ceremony right there on the floor in the middle of the store. And he was bringing out artifacts from Machu Picchu. And, it was just an unbelievable story. And it's something that I should probably write about because it's not exactly your everyday thing. So I was really broken into some of these more ancient, more mysterious ways of doing ceremony and working in those kinds of things. I'm not an indigenous person, as you can tell.
Right.
I'm young, I'm American, I'm white, I'm blonde, and that has a lot of people have a lot of problems with that. So it was an identity crisis for a while for me because here I was experiencing a lot of these things with indigenous people, very called to the teaching. But I didn't fit in. I still don't fit in on some levels. And, they're very hesitant to open up their circle to people who are not native, and especially, touristy-looking people like myself. But it didn't seem to be a problem there in the middle of the store in Peru, and from that point on, it was another past life regression, blow-open kind of experience where everything that happened to me in that particular time and place was just one more moment in time that really just
one
And when you asked before, how did I come into this profession? Like, I don't think I really had a choice.
Well, I think that's the way it is with most of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do what we do because we cannot not do what we do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would expect that, as you've had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have more experiences, that when you're talking with people, indigenous people, they probably, when they hear your stories, tend to gain your confidence, or you gain their confidence more easily, I would expect.
Well, yeah. When I talk to them about my experience and what I've been through, and life experience. The shamanic world, you usually go through some form of shamanic death that, has been ceremonial, or, you're going to go for a long time. I think in today's society, there's so many people who experience emotional and mental death. They go through these parts of themselves, and so how much is enough? We really do experience tremendous amount of change and transformation within our own lives in 21st century, regardless of the cultures that we come from. And it's really important for people to understand that when somebody says shamanic or indigenous, we're not taking anything away from anybody. We're actually reaching back into our own timelines and our own ancestors, no matter what color our skin is, and connecting to that essence and that knowledge and that energy. And really, we've lost that. We've lost the sense of ceremony in our life. The average white American has no concept of ceremony except for what they experience in church. They don't really understand the history of ceremony, where it comes from, what different ways there are to do it. And so for me, the shamanic way of learning was very important to me because it put me back into contact with that part of myself that I really feel is missing.
Well,
a lot of people that come to me to work with me, one, are surprised that I'm so young. They expect me to be like in my 60s or 70s. When they read my bio, they think, oh, this woman can't be young. Um,
Yeah, she's done far too much to be young. Well, you know,
well, but I have, and that's the point. It's like we really don't know what kind of experience people have had.
no, we don't. But you know what? People tend to judge people by what they've been able to do. It's just a
Well, yeah,
natural kind of thing.
very true. Yeah.
Well, you know, you're talking about these difficult spiritual passages or transformations that we all go through. Unfortunately, because we've lost some of these earlier understandings, call them indigenous or shamanic, whatever name you want to put on them, we often tend to make the experience a bad or a negative experience. And even though those experiences are painful and difficult, they are by no means negative. They really transport us into a whole nother space, especially if we understand that and we can flow with it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree, definitely.
So you had another experience in Egypt where you were initiated into the Blue Lotus. What is that all about?
Well, it was again, it was one of these things where it was not a planned thing. Well, planned by humans anyway, planned in our minds.
Right.
In the greater plan, it was planned. Well, another woman and I were sitting in a restaurant. I had been there with a tour, and the tour had gone home. We had been there for 2 weeks, and I was staying an extra week to do some site previews for different hotels and such. And so we were just minding our own business, sitting in a restaurant area in Luxor, and lo and behold, one of her I guess, boyfriends or somebody that she used to be involved with happened to show up.
Huh?
She lived in Egypt for 20 years, and she was our trip coordinator at the time. And he just happened to show up, and he sat down across the table, and she couldn't believe that he was sitting there. And it's a rather personal story, but, long story short, he ended up moving into the house she used to own. And he had brought some Blue Lotus plants up from Sudan, and he was growing them in Luxor, and we ended up being able to see the thing with the Blue Lotus is that if you've ever been to Egypt, you'll notice that the lotus plant is a really, really important and potent symbol that's all over the temples, all through Egypt, all throughout Egypt. The lotus was the ultimate symbol of rebirth, spiritual enlightenment, and they used to ingest the flowers. The flowers are ingestible. I think that they have some minor hallucinogenic effects, and it was a great teacher. And it was often given to the king or given to the high priest or gifted from the high priestess. It comes from a feminine nature, a feminine quality of gifting, a rite of passage, so to speak.
So it's a mind expansion type.
It's mind expansion. Yeah, it's a mind. But it's not. It's not like doing ayahuasca or, it's not. You're not totally out of yourself, and you're not throwing.
So it wouldn't have been Timothy Leary's favorite.
Yeah.
Do you remember who? Do you know who Timothy Leary was? Timothy, you probably don't. Timothy Leary was the man who brought us LSD and the new age, new consciousness here in this country. He was a Harvard professor back in the 60s. He was the LSD guru back in those days. I'm quite sure that his work, though it ended kind of sadly, really paved the way for people like you and I to be able to talk about the kind of things we talk about and be known. So what was your experience with the Blue Lotus when you ingested it?
Well, I did. I was given the opportunity
Right.
to eat one, and it was an incredible event on a personal level also, because just what it symbolized was for me, the higher powers that be, even allowing us to find the odds of us being at the right place at the right time to even be able to find our way to that plant was unbelievable. And the Blue Lotus has left Egypt a long time ago. It was kind of driven out of the Nile due to changes in the environment, introduction of certain kinds of fish that would eat the roots, and so it really disappeared a long time ago. But in ancient Egypt, it was thriving, and it was all over, and it was very, very sacred plant. So the odds of us being able to find our way back to the Blue Lotus, in a sense, because I have a very strong connection to Egypt, and I feel I've been there many times in past lives, was pretty extraordinary in itself. So then to be able to ingest one and to feel that kind of cleansing, and it was really subtle. It wasn't like it was a powerful, vision-producing kind of thing, but my dreams for several weeks after were very extraordinary. And as a psychic, as somebody who channels, as somebody who connects to those places, it was a really big mind opener. So it really did, again, another push into the work that I do. And it's a part of me, it's in my cells now. That's how I feel about it, and that's how I work with it. So when I travel into the ethers, when I go into that state of mind to work with clients or to do a reading, I connect to that plant, and I use it as a guide.
Uh-huh.
So as far as initiation goes, that's really what initiation is all about, is being able to, integrate something like that into your own experience of who you are.
So it enhances you. It has enhanced your empathic abilities, is what it sounds like.
In a nutshell.
Well, one of the things, Hillary, that I find fascinating about you, and I very much relate to, is your willingness to experiment and to stay open and follow where the path leads. And that's really how I've lived my life. And it takes you places you never thought you would go. But and I don't, my belief system over the years has morphed many times. How about with you? These experiences change us, and we stop believing some of what we once believed dearly and take on whole new beliefs. Has that been the case with you?
Well, yeah, and I think that's the case with everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the point. I think that's the point of life. I think that's the point of what we're here to do. And I think that...
Well, yeah, but you know what, Hillary? That's you and I come by saying that those words very easily. But the largest segment of the population, the idea of changing what they believe is heretical. They don't want to do that. And so, I think sometimes we're, this comes so... natural to us, so we don't really appreciate the impact and the power of what goes on for us. The numbers of people that you affect because of who you are and what you believe is really, really, really powerful, Hillary. I just want to kind of acknowledge that for you. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing, we don't just realize just how much effect we really can have, even though that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I thank you for that, because it's very true. And I have a small group of people who are wonderful, and they help me, and they support me in my work, and they act as a staff on a volunteer basis, and it's really wonderful, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And you're right, you do get busy, and you forget the impact. But I think that's a good point, George, because, people forget their impact when they're crossing the street and they flip someone the bird,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
they see a dirty look, or they call a woman, the B word, or whatever it is. We can say that in the air, can't we?
Yeah, we sure can.
You have to understand that the quality of interaction that we have with other people is so potent and so powerful that no matter what our belief systems are, we're spreading that energetically, so the next time you cross, I'm going to challenge people watching and people listening, is, the next time you cross paths with somebody, think about that. Think about the impact that you might be having on somebody simply by smiling at them or being nice, or, not coming from a place of, judgment, or looking at somebody and judging what they look like. I think that's really, really important, and you're right, George, because sometimes we forget there are a lot of people out there. This world would be a totally different place that come from a different perspective where, things are like this. It's never going to change, and these are my beliefs, and this is the way that it is.
Well, what you're asking right now is probably the most. I don't want to say the most spiritual thing, but it is a very high spiritual act that you're asking people to do. What I'm hearing you say is you're suggesting that they be present in the moment and aware of their actions. And that's huge on this spiritual path. So it takes some people lifetimes, not just one, to get to the place where they're even willing to consider that. Most people are so on automatic pilot. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think this awakening process, this transformation that from what I read, you and I are, both in the belief that we're in the middle of a kind of a revolutionary transformational process. We certainly better be. But most people are asleep, and changing their perspective and their ideas and waking them up is really what it's all about, isn't it?
Well, it is. I feel that is what it's about. And, the name of your show says a lot to what we're going through.
Yeah.
The process is that we're getting away from the dogma and it has to be this way, and there's a mediator between myself and a higher power. We need to walk away from that, in my opinion. And I know that a lot of people would get very angry about that.
Well, they do get angry, but that's okay. They say things that could make lots of people angry too. I heard somebody the other day telling me that his religion had ran over his dogma, and he was very sad. So, but yeah, you know what? It's unfortunate when you. As a matter of fact, seeing how that we're here in this part of the conversation, what do you think the impact of just take the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam? What do you think the impact is on transformation, and what part will they play in this transformation that we're looking to have occur? Have you thought about that?
Well, I have. I mean, on my show, I touch base on some exopolitics, and we get into some of these big topics. On my Facebook page, I have a really large following, and I'll post stuff on there to stir the pot, so to speak, and get people to talk about it. But what I think is really happening is they're trying to, keep control over what's happening and trying to kind of grow at the same time. So we have a very interesting mix of very old worldly-like thought processing and protocol and control issues, trying to adjust and transform, and you're having a mixture of responses from that, not only from the people, but within the organization. I mean, when you look at the Catholic Church and you look at, what's coming to surface now with a lot of the child abuse cases, you have to ask yourself, well, what's really been going on all these years, and what are we really worshiping, and what's happening to all of this, and what kind of, examples are we setting for people and in our own belief systems, and trying to push something that really suppresses. I mean, when I talk about divine feminine consciousness, eventually I have to talk about the Inquisition and the collective woundage that comes from being a woman.
And even before that,
for being healers and along those lines.
Yeah, well, and even centuries before that, Hillary.
Yeah.
Well,
it's been going on for a long time, but modern day people hold this connection to church.
Right.
In those three major religions, is the connection to church. And so, they have lost their connection to nature. I mean, church can really be anywhere outside. It can be someplace that you find a connection to God, to whatever that may be for yourself.
Absolutely.
But I think it's changed. It has to change. I mean, you can't. It's kind of like trying to keep a herd of cattle that's grown beyond capacity to hold in the corral, so to speak, and eventually you have to open up that gate and let people out.
Well, if I belong to an organization that deprives any segment of humanity of their human rights, and I may disagree with that reality that they're denying those human rights, I am still supporting that organization, and I become a huge part of the problem just by being a member of that. And if you suggest that to people, and they become very incensed about it, but it's a reality. I mean, if I might not believe what the Ku Klux Klan did for years, but if I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan, even though I may not participate, I'm still part of the energy.
That's right.
And
That's right.
yeah,
It's kind of like saying, I don't believe in judging people, but look at that person, how horrible he's dressed, he must be lower class.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, it's the same kind of thing. So it's really becoming walk your talk, and you know, getting back to your roots and trying to understand what that even means, and finding somebody who does understand what that means and is able to guide them. I mean, we're really coming out of, in my own opinion, and I know that this is going to, you know, come back because it always does, but we're really not in the age of finding a guru.
No.
I mean, we've
That's
kind of
over.
moved beyond that, I would hope, because, you know, the guru that we're supposed to be finding is inside of ourselves, and, you know, it's really a process of going inside and finding that connection to self and to truth and to who we are, and understanding what that even means and how to express it in your own life and move forward and share it with other people in a way that isn't condescending or, you know, righteous. There's a sort of spiritual, egotistical kind of attitude that can come out of that, too. So we have to be really careful to always balance ourselves, to balance male and female energies and understanding what that means, and balancing the light and dark, and respecting what both teach, and just, you know, living our lives in a way that creates a sense of balance. And then we become kind of mirrors for other people to take a look at and say, well, you know, maybe I need to do something too. It's never about going out and pointing the finger at somebody else and saying, well, you need to do this.
Well,
You know, somebody speaks their truth. That's their truth, whether we agree with it or not.
Well, spiritual pride,
Get over the fact that people speak their truth and it doesn't agree with ours.
spiritual pride is a very difficult thing. I think it's more harmful than just, you know, pride that's, you know, false pride. I think it really, really harms us.
Yeah.
And, you know, at some point, Hillary, if this transformation, I think it's a leaderless movement. From what I can see, it's a leaderless movement, and it's going to have to be. And we're going to have figure a way to have a dialogue to be able to talk about these things without demonizing one another. And I think shows like your show, shows like my show, and other people like us need to begin to speak to these things and open up dialogues that give people an opportunity to examine their beliefs without having to become defensive to the point where they can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, George, because it's one of those things where I hate to say it, but I see it a lot, and it's something that, you know, we need a check system. We need our own checks and balance system within ourselves. You know, we have to know when we're off center. We have to know when we're coming from our ego. You know, even if we teach that or what that means, I mean, we still have to find ways to ground ourselves, and we have to know when our energy is extended too much. We have to, you know, we just have to keep constant check-in with who we are and what's going on. And, you know, if you find yourself lashing out at other people, it's because there's something going on inside. So it's time to just kind of sit back and check in and see what's going on.
Well, see, I think that you know, like so often, if not most of the time, to learn that about ourselves obviously is going to require some self-examination. You go back to Socrates. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, and I'm quite sure that's true. So I think the time of the guru is gone. That's past. I think we needed it when it was here, but your time is here, and other teachers' times to help people to find how to deal with their own feelings and emotions, how to deal with the reality of this mirror effect you were talking about. You know, that when I see something in you that bothers me, it's really something going on in me. We don't come by that naturally, and we're definitely not taught that as children. For the most part, our examples are usually the opposite of that. So, but I think somehow or other, that we're kind of moving along with all this. And thank goodness there's a power greater and higher than you and I, because we wouldn't be able to see how to get the job done at all. You know. So
well, that keeps us in check too, you know.
Oh yeah, well yeah, it helps to keep us right sized, right?
Yeah.
Not too big and not too small.
That's right.
Yeah, but everything that we can be. Listen, you're doing something that I hadn't really heard of before that sounded pretty interesting to me. you're experimenting with Slim Sperling's tools. What's that about? There's a nose mask, and they got an environmental harmonizer,
Oh,
and
you've done your homework.
why, sure.
Oh, that's great.
I,
I'm
we,
so happy when I come on shows and people have done their homework because it's so much more fun.
yeah, but when I get a really interesting guest, I mean, if I didn't do my homework, we would miss so much. Yeah, no.
Well, Slim Sperling, again, this was another kind of occurrence that happened. Somebody had told me about his work and suggested that I interview him, and he passed away a few years ago. So as I looked into his work, it was not an opportunity for an interview, but they had mentioned his tools and they had mentioned his work, and I'm a healthy skeptic, and I said, well, okay, let me see. And I checked out online like you did, and I looked at the stuff, and I said, what? That was kind of my first expression, but then I read it, and I did some looking into it, and I actually started, I understood the concepts that he was talking about, and it just so happened that the director of the center that I work out of and I teach Reiki out of and do sessions out of happened to have practically his whole collection. Offered to lend it to me for 2 weeks. So she packed up every single tool that she had bought over the years, which pretty much was his whole collection. And as you know, that they're not inexpensive tools. So
no, they look expensive.
Several $1,000s worth of tools.
Right.
Just gave me a bag and said, "Have fun." And I, what are the odds? Again, what are the odds of this? So that's what I did. I took the tools home, and I played around with them, and I could see some energy fields with some of them, and I was experiencing this phenomena that I hadn't read his book yet, so I kind of did everything with this backwards. And so I played around with his tools, and actually I did a few sessions with clients, and then the woman who had lent me the tools, we traded some sessions, and we were doing some experiments with like biosecurity and stuff. And it was really extraordinary how incredibly effective these things were.
Really?
And when I gave them back to her at the end of the 2 weeks, it was like giving back a bag full of my own children. I mean, I really had grown on them, and they'd grown on me. And there were some tools that I really liked, and there were some that I didn't really feel anything with, to be honest with you. But I ended up buying my own, some pieces for my own collection. And I've been working with them ever since, and I incorporate them into my bodywork sessions, into my Reiki sessions. Even when I do readings, I use one of the larger rings to, put on my table, and I do my cards and stuff inside the ring. And I notice a difference when I dream. If I take one of the rings and put it under my pillow at night, my lucid dreaming is enhanced, and I can't describe it any other way, but it's enhanced. And then I read his book. And once I read Slim's book, and the science behind what he's doing, and the education behind, who he was, his story is extraordinary, and I have a lot of respect for him. And he's very, very well educated. He really just turned away from a very profitable career as a scientist and decided he was an earth angel, and he was really just here to create these tools, and that was his job in this lifetime, and that's what he did. And I wish I could have had the opportunity to meet him and to talk to him in person. But, again, this was another kind of spontaneous, event-turning kind of thing for me in my own personal life, and I've incorporated them into my work, and I share them. And when I go do events, I'll bring his tools, and when we set up our ceremonial altars and things of that sort, we use them, and people are drawn to them. It's like children to candy. It's like you just can't bring them anywhere and not have people respond to them. And so they really have made quite a bit of difference in my life personally and professionally, and I would highly recommend anyone interested in them to check them out, because I can attest firsthand that they really work.
Well, you've caught my attention because
them is real.
You've caught my attention because my first reaction when I saw it was the same as yours. I've been down the road. I've been doing this stuff for almost 40 years, 35 years, and it's like, so I've seen an awful lot of things, but I had never ran across this fellow Sperling, so I will definitely follow up on that. Listen, you specialize in what you call raw, wild, primal feminine consciousness, and how to be an oracle of the in your own ordained joy. Tell what does that mean? What do you do to bring? Do you, and the second part of my question is, we're all male and female, each of us.
Hmm.
Do you work with that energy with males also, or just strictly with females?
No, I love working with men. I love men. I mean, I really love men who come to me and want to understand what that means. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's great. And to be honest with you, I do run a lot of women's circles. I have taught at women's only events, and I have a women's circle. I do a dream circle. We're starting dream circles next month, actually November, and people can find out that information on my website. They can go to HillaryRaymo.com, or I have a meetup group locally where I volunteer as a facilitator once a month to lead women through dreaming techniques and so on and so forth. But men they contact me and they want to know why they can't join. They want to join. But the teachings that I teach are for both men and women, because the energies are in both of us, and we have to understand what that even means, and we have to understand how to build a healthy relationship with both of those energies. This isn't about sexual orientation. This is not about
No.
or sexually. This is about how your individual energetic imprint affects you and the world around you. And so we come from a divine feminine perspective, and we also have a divine male perspective. And I tell people on a simple level, it's about being and doing. What is your relationship with being? Are you able to be in silence? Some people can't even sit down for more than 5 minutes and not be doing something.
I couldn't meditate for the first time I tried to meditate. I think it was 1974. I couldn't make it 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit there. I just was an impossibility. Also, Hillary, I've done quite a bit of work on integration on these polar opposites that we all carry around. Our light and dark, and the male and female in me, and that is so important. I think for transformation that men get in contact with that feminine part of ourselves, so that we can stop some of this horrendous war that just has been going on for just since Cain and Abel, it's good to hear that there's some training going on out there. Do you use some specific texts, or is it just strictly a program that you put together, or have you written something about it?
Well, it is a program that I've put together. It's called my Untraining. My Untrained.
Okay, so that's your untraining energy. Is that what
Yeah,
yeah.
because we learn how to be a woman, and we learn how to be a man in our culture.
Absolutely.
And so those energies create a very distinct and definite pattern within ourselves. And so it's like putting together a sweater, weaving together a piece of clothing. You almost have to take the thread and pull it all apart and then redesign it, because it's a big task. This is not something that you can learn in a weekend event. You really need to work with somebody, and whether it's myself or somebody else, it doesn't matter. But what I do suggest to people is, when you start working with energy, you need to find somebody who knows what they're talking about. You need to find somebody who understands the ups and downs of working with energy, who's qualified and able to walk somebody through the emotional and mental breakdowns that it can cause, the spiritual breakdowns that it can cause, the physical healing that it can cause. And the reason I say physical healing is because when we've been sick our whole life, and then all of a sudden we go through the healing process, everything affects us on a physical level. The biological level is affected too.
Absolutely.
So, this is a great responsibility. And, what I've decided to do with my own trainings, and they were day-long, weekend-long kind of put together, where people were really asking me for this information in more of a formal kind of teaching setting. And I said, okay, I'll put this together, and it worked, and I've worked with many great, wonderful people. But what I'm deciding to do especially through the 2011-2012 gateway that we're going through now energetically, collectively on this planet, is open myself up to being able to work with people more one-on-one and take people through a process where it's more about the teaching setting, one-on-one, not necessarily apprenticeship-like, but I guess you could consider it that, and teach them and work with them and walk with them as a guide into what this means on a regular basis. I mean, it's become such an obvious thing to many people that the balancing of male and female is a gigantic task to take on.
Gigantic, it's
really
huge.
It's not something you can do in just a teleconference or a day-long workshop, because people leave with a set of tools. In my Untraining, they leave with a set of tools. But the follow-up and the healing processing that takes place from that affects us on a physical, emotional, spiritual, mental level. And without a guide or without some kind of follow-up, it's almost irresponsible to send people away on a healing process and not have some kind of follow-through. So I have decided to expand on this, because I have so many people coming to me wanting to learn this, wanting to understand what this means, wanting it to be practical, and being able to apply it to a 21st century life. I mean, we're taking old knowledge, ancient wisdom, if you will, that has been channeled in, has been brought in through text, through study, through teachers, and trying to apply it to the soccer moms and the people who go to the grocery store and make dinner every night, work 9 to 5 jobs, and are worried about making mortgage payments, and oh yeah, we have to be spiritual, we have to balance our male and female. That has no meaning and context to the average person who's out there just going from day to day.
Hillary, how old are you?
Well, I'm almost 40.
You are a very wise lady. I'll tell you what, I am absolutely certain that we must move to a one-on-one, back to a one-on-one passing on of these wisdoms and of these modalities, these things that we do. They can't be taught from the pulpit. They can't be taught like you said, on a web meetings situation. But they must be passed on one-on-one. They're just too powerful, and they just take such individual kind of understandings to bring them into that pragmatic, that practical level where you can use them in your day-to-day life. I really admire that you've recognized that and you're willing to scale down and bring it down to a one-on-one. I think that's huge.
Well, I think it's important, and it'll mean that I work with less people,
right?
But it also will mean that the quality of that interaction and the quality of that information exchange.
Well, Hillary, you may work with less people, but what will happen is, in the end, you will have affected far more people, because every one of those people are going to affect a minimum of 6 or 7 people.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
Oh, yeah, and that domino ripple effect is what's going to take us, I believe, to that tipping point. We must have that. I'll tell you what, I have probably another 20 things I'd like to talk about with you, but we're not going to get there. So I want to jump back to an experience you had in 2007. I guess we got 5 or 6 minutes left here, and you had a near-death experience. What happened there, and what was what occurred from you after that because of it?
Well, I was in real estate at the time, and I was working. That's what I was trying to do. For a living, for a 9 to 5 job, and I was also developing my Reiki practice, and I had done all this spiritual work, and so I was living really 2 lives. I had my corporate, quote, corporate spiritual life going on, and I was really divided and conflicted on some levels, and so it didn't bother me at the time though. But I had a major health breakdown. I had a major health crisis, and I had an extraordinary experience where, basically, and this is what happens when you're really not listening and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I had been feeling the call for a long time to take my work and move out more publicly, and I was really scared to do that.
It's frightening.
I was really afraid to go public with what I had experienced and talk about it. I mean, I have a family, and I was working in different varieties of work through college and stuff, and so I was really worried about what people were going to think, and I really didn't want to do it, and but the nudge from Spirit was constantly do it, do it, do it. I mean, I had all these really extraordinary experiences that I really didn't realize how extraordinary they were, because I just kind of assumed, well, everybody can experience that, you know.
Right.
But anyway, so what happens is you end up having some kind of brick wall hit your life, and it happened to be a health experience, and I was basically told and hospitalized that was it, checkout time, and you're not going to make it, and this is it. So the thought of me going and leaving this planet, this realm, whatever dimension, whatever you want to call it, made no sense to me, because I knew I had more work to do, and I really had to sit with the reality that, okay, I have to say goodbye to everything. And so the near-death process for me wasn't necessarily so much dying and coming back. It was a death of giving away and shedding everything. I mean, I had to look at my two children and say goodbye and really believe and feel that I wasn't going to see them yet. And to deal with that incredible tsunami of emotions and thought processing and spiritual belief processing was extraordinary for me. And it was really, really life challenging and life changing. And
sometimes it takes those really traumatic experiences just to bring us past that one last fear too, doesn't it?
Well, that was the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about giving up belief structures, and we talk about the challenging and taking lifetimes to give up belief structures. I mean, when you actually give away and give up everything that means something to you and everyone that means something to you on a level of never going to see you again, goodbye, time for me to check out and go on. I mean, it was incredibly hard to do. I had an incredibly short period of time to do it in a hospital setting, no less, which is very benign and cold, in my opinion. And at the same time, it was one of the most freeing things I've ever experienced. Because in giving away the very, very things that a mother giving away, a mother saying goodbye to her children, you know, I mean, I don't know even how to put that into words.
I don't think there are words for that kind of thing.
I mean, it's anybody that's a parent out there, even a father saying goodbye to their children, looking at, you know, small little faces and saying, oh my God, I'm never going to see them. I might not be here next week. I'm not going to see them grow up. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Well, you know, then to deal with the fact that, do I have all my, you know, ducks in a row? Do I have money? Do I have insurance? Is everything going to be okay? But that really wasn't the point at that time. It really wasn't about the planning aspect of it. It was more about the emotional connection, the love connection, being able to say goodbye. And I had to do that. And then it didn't happen.
Hillary, I've got Tom flagging me here. You know, I'll tell you what, I wish we had more time. You've just been a really interesting guest. I've enjoyed my time with you. We got a minute or so here left. Is there anything that I didn't touch on that you really? Tom's been putting your contact information up in our chat room and out on the Facebook and so forth. Is there anything that you that we've missed that you would like to say in this last minute before we say goodbye?
Well, George, you've done a great job. I can say that, and I just want to say thanks so much for having me on. And you know, we did cover a lot. We covered a lot of stuff that I haven't talked about before. Because nobody's ever done their homework and really asked me questions like that. And I appreciate your depth and giving me an opportunity to talk about things that are more on a personal level, because I don't get an opportunity to do that very often. And I think it's really important, because unless you really know somebody's background, I mean, you're just kind of going off what you see on their website or what you see on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And unless that's really out there publicly, which mine really isn't out there, that my personal story really isn't out there publicly that much. And it's not because it's by choice necessarily. It's just because I would rather people focus on my offerings and my work than my own personal story. So I think that really, what I'd like to close with is just really getting people to be aware of how powerful sharing your story can be.
Story's huge. It's really important. I have a suggestion, Hillary. I have quite a list of authors and really great personalities that I have interviewed. And I would like to suggest to them that if you're interested, that they hook up and and maybe you'd like to have them on your show. And if you're interested in sharing some of your guests with me, some of the lists I saw, you've interviewed some very interesting people. I would be interested in doing that to do. Maybe we can talk about that at a time, maybe next week or something.
Sure.
Because I have some people I know that you would be interested in talking to, would make good guests on your show. And the more exposure we get for these ideas, the more I think you and I are playing our part in all this transformation that's going on. Hillary, I'm sorry. I've got to say goodbye. I'll look forward to talking to you and maybe one day even meet and have a cup of coffee.
Sounds good, George. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
You have a great week now. Thank
Right.
you. Tom, she is a great guest. What a nice lady, and really, really on the mark with some of the things she's doing. I think I'll check out Sperling's things. That looks pretty interesting. So remember, I've got a great guest next week. I have a Broadway star. I'm going to see if we can get her to give us a little idea, maybe a little song or something, and we're going to talk about fairies that she ran into in a fairy glen in Scotland. So be sure and tune in next week. And in the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.